Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this meeting of the Executive Committee to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please select your presence on the tablets. Chair, we have a quorum with 5 members present and 2 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's move ahead to non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anyone who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of the Executive Committee. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do not.
All right. We will move to approval of the minutes of the November 7th joint meeting of the Audit, Oversight, and Executive Committees. Clerk, do we have any public comment on those minutes?
We do not.
Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? All right, we have a motion from Vice Chair Goebel. I will be happy to second that motion. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, Clerk, please call the roll.
If members can please make their selections on the tablets. The motion passes with 6 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's move to our discussion items. Item 4 is the 2025 State and Federal Legislative Program, and we're going to invite Julia Tour to begin this presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. So as mentioned, I'll be reviewing the draft 2025 legislative program today. So the purpose of this program is to really guide our advocacy efforts. It's not meant to be fully comprehensive, so staff will certainly bring back any key specific legislative items as needed. And we will also continue our partnerships and collaboration with other regional entities and key stakeholders on any MTS related priorities. So as you've seen in the draft program, we have listed out both state and federal legislative priorities. So I'll just be reviewing some highlights from the program, but the entire list of priorities are included in your attachment in the packet. So first, under transit funding priorities, I'd like to highlight that we'll be supporting legislation that generates new revenues for transit projects and operating costs, and we'll seek subsidies for specialized fare programs that are supported by the board. We'll seek funding for priority capital projects, and we will continue to collaborate with the California Transit Association and the California Transit Transformation Task Force on making changes to TDA. For equity and social justice, we will be supporting those measures that help to better serve and deliver equitable transportation options. We will seek funding and resources to help those experiencing homelessness throughout the system. And we'll be supporting efforts that help address issues of climate change and increase transit ability to play a lead role in that effort. We've demonstrated our commitment to addressing climate change with efforts such as transitioning to a fully zero-emission bus fleet. So under the TOD section, we will support legislation that aids transit operators' efforts to create high-density transit-oriented development. Under public safety, we are consistently looking for ways to not only keep our passengers safe, but our employees safe too. So as part of that effort, we'll be seeking legislation in coordination with CTA that promotes employee safety, including higher penalties for assaults on transit workers. And then under regulatory matters, we'll be seeking funding to offset costs when new regulatory requirements are proposed. Under the labor relations section, we'll continue to monitor and respond to court proceedings regarding the provisions of PEPRA, and we'll bring back any necessary updates when needed. And of course, we'll support legislative programs of other agencies and organizations where it's consistent with the MTS legislative program. So a quick recap of 2024 MTS related bills. AB 2043, which was authored by Assemblymember Berner. This was a repeat bill that we pursued the previous year to attempt to resolve a funding issue that we've experienced related to non-medical and non-emergency medical transportation services. The effort would have required DHCS to engage with public paratransit operators in developing guidance to better alleviate the fiscal burdens of these services. Unfortunately, this has been a couple of years now of unsuccessfully pushing the bill to final approval. And the main reasons that we're hearing is why it was held back was due to unknown cost impacts to DHCS. So we'll continue to engage with DHCS and with Medi-Cal managed care plans as best we can on this issue to try and attempt to find long-term solutions. AB 1904, authored by Assemblymember Ward. This was approved this year. It will provide all transit agencies with the authority to equip our buses with yield right-of-way signs on the rear of the vehicle. This will better assist in the flow of traffic for buses and could positively impact route times with less delays waiting to merge back into traffic from bus stops. So this official resolution approval for this authority will actually be brought to the board at next week's meeting. So looking ahead for 2025, we have a couple of bill proposals to review. You'll see this proposal here is actually a rollover bill we had planned in coordination with CTA last year. It was ultimately postponed, but it's going to kick off again come next year. This is the proposal that will seek higher penalties for assaults on transit workers in an effort to really continue promoting and finding ways to keeping our employees safe. So this proposal listed here, this will also be in coordination with CTA. We're going to be seeking temporary amendments to bus axle weight limits for zero emission buses or ZEBs. This will allow bus manufacturers a few more years to improve upon the issues that they're experiencing related to balancing weight limitations and also longer ZEB ranges. So our current models currently meet the requirement. However, it really limits our battery capacity and range of the vehicles. So this proposal will allow more time for improvements in technology and then extended ranges to the vehicles. And then this final bill proposal would amend contracting thresholds to align up to not exceeding the Federal Transit Administration FTA thresholds. So bit of a background, we last adjusted our formal competitive thresholds in 2022. We had an increase from 100,000 to 150,000. This was after not having made changes to the thresholds for nearly 20 years. So this proposal would actually allow the board to authorize contracting thresholds up to FTA's simplified threshold levels, which could allow for more procurements to fall into the micro purchase or small acquisitions, which would help reduce administrative burdens. The formal competitive bidding process really takes significantly more time to prepare, advertise, review, and award. So by referencing FTA's stated thresholds by name rather than by a specific dollar value, which is what is currently in MTS's enabling legislation, this would ease maintenance of regulations given the likelihood that FTA in the future changes threshold amounts to account for inflationary purposes. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our state and federal lobbyists to provide brief legislative updates. So we'll first start with Mark Watts, and then we'll hear from Peter Pizer. Let's see, I believe Mark is on, if you're able to unmute. Let's see, we might have audio difficulties here. We could start off, let's see, if Peter, are you able to unmute? And then we can circle back with Mark.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. Members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today and also the opportunity to represent you here in Washington, as I have since 2005. We are entering a very interesting period, which is one of the benefits of this work is that it's never boring. Um, we have an incoming administration that, while it causes significant concern to some people around specific issues that are very controversial in the transportation field, we're hoping that the incoming Trump administration will behave similar to how the previous one did. When President Trump took office the first time, he had a Republican Congress on Capitol Hill for the first 2 years, and he proposed budgets that did suggest significant cuts to transit funding, but those cuts were in the area of New START projects, not the underlying formula program. So uh, those cuts were not directed at MTS related projects, and the Republican Congress did not end up going along with them. So during the time that President Trump was in office, last time we had stable transit funding, and the programs operated essentially as they had before. As I said at the top, transportation is not viewed as a significant hot button issue, and we're certainly hoping that the new Trump administration will also treat it that way. We are anticipating some changes, however, in the way they operate programs that were enacted as part of President Biden's infrastructure initiative, the bipartisan infrastructure law. And of most interest at the moment for MTS is the program that funds uh, clean bus technology, such as zero emission vehicles and the infrastructure associated with them. One of our top priorities federally has been to pursue funding for the SeaTac campus. MTS submitted a very strong application last year to a program called the Low No Bus discretionary program, which was significantly increased by the bipartisan infrastructure law, and also a sister program, which is the more long-standing bus and bus discretionary or bus and bus facilities program. The application was rated very highly, but was not funded as a result of the very strong national competition for that funding. When the Trump administration comes in, we are anticipating that they will not emphasize electric vehicles to the same degree that the Biden administration has done, which means that both of these programs are likely to spread the money out a little bit more to other technologies and make the competition even tougher. So we have a very competitive application for SeaTac, and we'll have to be working very hard to push that forward in a more competitive environment. So that'll be top of mind for us going into fiscal 25 or fiscal 26, going forward, in the new fiscal year and the new calendar year. Another issue that's top of mind for us and still pending here in Washington at the moment, which may spill over into the new year, is emergency transit relief funding for MTS and the aftermath of the January storm that hit the San Diego region. MTS has significant needs and costs that were associated with repairs and bridge bus service during that time immediately after the storm, and those costs are in excess of $25 million at this point. There is a federal program that will help with those costs, but it currently has no money in its budget. And there is pending legislation right now on Capitol Hill to address that. It may get enacted here before the end of the year, but could also spill over into next year. And then looking more long-term, we're preparing for the reauthorization of the transit programs that provide funding to MTS on an ongoing basis. Those expire on September 30, 2026. But in 2025, Congress will start the work on preparing for that reauthorization of those programs. It's particularly important this time because those programs got a very significant increase in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it's certainly going to be a goal of MTS and transit agencies nationwide to preserve those increases on a going forward basis and sort of create that funding level as the new floor for funding transit programs. That's going to be a significant battle. And on Capitol Hill, we do have significant support from our own congressional delegation. Both senators, including new Senator Adam Schiff, are strong supporters of public transit, and our own San Diego County congressional delegation, a very strong support there from the Democratic members of the delegation, and we'll be working closely with them to start building the case for continuing the robust funding levels that were enacted in the infrastructure law. I should say that we have on Capitol Hill, we of course now have a Republican majority coming in the Senate, 53 members, and also a Republican majority in the House, but the slimmest majority in history. The Republicans will only have 2 votes to spare on any partisan party line vote with 220 members. And that gets even trickier for them in the first several months of this year coming up because 3 of their members are slated to be part of President Trump's cabinet. And that means after those 3 depart, there'll be a lag time before special elections occur to bring new members into the House. And during that time, which will likely be the first 4 months of the year, there will be only a 1 vote cushion for the Republicans. So it's going to be very difficult to get things done, but they will be looking at sort of consensus legislation in the early going to try to advance an agenda. So it's going to be an interesting time. As I said at the outset, we do have reason to believe, based on history, that public transit and other transportation programs will not be the subject of significant controversy. But of course, remains to be seen how the second Trump administration unfolds. And with that, I'll pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think we have Mark's audio issue worked out. So Mark, feel free whenever you're ready.
All right. And I apologize. Can you hear me just as a check here right here?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. And I apologize for that mess up on my end. So I'm very pleased to be able to address you from Sacramento today. Just to put the context of where the legislature is here in Sacramento, December 2nd was the convening of the 2025-26 legislative 2-year session. And as well, on a parallel track, the governor's call for a special session was convened into special session as well. In both cases, both the regular and the special session recessed until January 6th, and that's when the hard work starts to begin for the year. I would note that in terms of some immediate deadlines that face organizations and the third house, January 24th is the last date to submit bill ideas to the Legislative Council through a member's office. And as well, February 24th is the last day under the Constitution to introduce new bills that are regular bills, not 2/3 vote bills that have a special pathway. So late January and late February are the 2 key dates that we will be looking at as we move forward. Overall, from a election perspective and a membership perspective in the legislature, the Democrats retain supermajority control in both houses, and beyond that, in a historic first, women are poised to constitute a majority of the California State Senate seats, as well as the membership of both the Senate Democratic and Republican caucus. So that is I've been around a while, and I remember one of the first women who had been elected from Fresno County, and that was probably 30 years ago. So this has been a dedicated march towards equality and equity. So it's been interesting to watch that occur. The other factor to take into account, and I'm probably spending too much time on this, but in the membership of the total of 120 legislators, total for both houses, over a quarter of them are brand new to the legislative scene. Although they may have had work with or experience working on issues from their city posts, county posts, and other organizational posts, it's the first time they will be in-house. So we're interested and we'll be working with them and trying to get to know them as well as we can quickly. One note is that at least 10 chairs of standing committees will not be returning. We knew that going in, but that means there'll be new chairs being appointed. And sometimes that results in shifting of who wants to take on what new responsibility. So far, there is no indication that either Assemblymember Wilson, who chairs the Assembly Transportation Committee, nor Senator Cortese, who chairs the Senate Committee, intends to go on to other positions at this point in time, but we'll be watching that carefully and staying in touch with their offices. I'd like to mention the state budget picture because, as you know, we've come out of several years where we had fairly large surpluses, followed by several years where we had significantly large and substantial deficits. And the work through the last 2 years to address the deficit has been, I think I can say now in retrospect, has accomplished the goals they were trying to get to, which was getting back to a balanced budget over time. The November bulletin from the Department of Finance shows that state revenues for the upcoming fiscal year are already showing or reflecting that they will be over budget estimates. So to me, that's a good thing. It's backed up by the Legislative Analyst Office recent fiscal outlook, and they have found that the state budget is roughly balanced and with a small projected deficit of $2 billion on the downside. Well, I will also add that this week, Moody's, the reporting agency on state resources and other fiscal affairs of other organizations, did move California from negative to neutral. So I think taking all that into account, one thing I will say is that it looks like the state budget will be roughly balanced moving forward, which is a very good reflection on the hard work taken on by the last legislature and the governor. In terms of anticipated legislation that we're looking at, I expect to see a lot of work going on cap and trade. If you recall that situation, the extension of cap and trade that was enacted several years back contained a sunset date of 2030. And as we get closer to that, the ability of certain of the programs that the Secretary's office and high-speed rail both administer are precluded from looking too far out. Well, they can't go beyond 2030 in terms of trying to bring money forward to advance project delivery goals and objectives. So the extension of cap and trade is on the mind. It's like first and foremost within the legislative leadership and particularly the transportation committees. I've talked to both staff in both houses, and they are looking forward to having negotiations ending up with an extension, which would then uncork the ability to reach forward and bring some of that money backwards to help out on capital programs. Now, I'm a member of the Transit Transformation Task Force, and as well as your CEO, and we've been looking at, the task force is looking at ways to improve and transform the ability for transit agencies to undertake your business, get back to or get ahead of the transit needs that the state really has to acquire so that we can meet a lot of our greenhouse gas emission goals. And we expect during the meeting this week, one of the conversations centered around new revenues. So this would be the first step for this organization. We'll talk about revenues. There'll be some prepackaged proposals that emerge from the conversations we just had that'll be presented to the task force in the coming months. And the two leading, in my view, the two leading proposals have to do with doubling TDA. And if you recall, TDA is the quarter-cent sales tax that has been on the books since the 70s, flows through the counties, through the MPOs, into local and regional transit agencies. And the idea of doubling that has been put on the table before by CTA, but I think there's a chance now to really put this into play. It depends on the willingness of the legislature to take on a very modest tax increase. So that's one I think is going to be front and center as we go through the year. The other one is the transit associations and the various transit agencies who belong to the task force are really looking at cap and trade as well. So those are the two areas I found to be most potentially fruitful. And that doesn't mean there aren't other good ideas out there. And we'll start to see work on those as that emerges over the next couple of weeks. So I'd like to close with a comment about legislation that's already been introduced. Your new member to San Diego from the San Diego delegation, Mr. DeMaio, has introduced a 10-bill package modeled after the Speaker Gingrich's proposals back on, a decade or so ago, and it's been entitled The Contract for California, and it's got a number of bills. Two of them are worth noting and watching. And the first one is the Taxpayer Protection Act. It would seek to be the authorizing legislation to accompany a constitutional amendment, which has not been introduced as of yet, as far as I can tell, that would restore and lock in the 2/3 vote requirement for special local tax increases. That's already in effect, but he is attacking in that instance the Upland versus Cannabis local initiative process. So we'll see if that bill gets a hearing in the coming months. The other bill I would just mention is the Cost of Living Act. It would seek to suspend all state taxes and fees on gasoline. And so if one of the issues that affects or would affect transit from that would be the STA, State Transit Assistance Funding, because it provides a portion of state sales tax on diesel fuel. So there's two ways for them to affect that in that bill. So we'll be watching this very quite carefully. I think there's going to be a massive outreach effort to quash his whole package, but right now it's in play. So with that, I will bring my comments to a close. And again, I apologize for the slow start to my conversation.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Peter, for those updates. Final slide here is our staff recommendation that the MTS Executive Committee forward a recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve the 2025 legislative program. Yeah, we'll take any questions or comments.
All right, thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, we will begin committee member discussion on this item, and we'll start our conversation with Director Moreno.
Thank you. And first and foremost, thank you for the presentation. I do appreciate the comprehensive approach outlined in the 2025 state and federal legislative program. Obviously, particularly the focus on transit funding. I'm very much in support of the potential bill co-sponsored by CTA on the assault on transit workers. I think they're public servants, and I understand just based on the security emails that we get, I think on a weekly basis, there have been a lot of attacks, and it certainly shouldn't be a job that you're afraid to do. So hopefully that will diminish that activity from occurring. Under the transit funding, point 23, which lists grade separation projects as a priority for funding, would you please clarify which specific locations or intersections are currently identified for grade separation improvements?
Yes, so for grade separation projects, really the current priority and focus right now is the Palomar Street grade separation. Um, Any future projects, we would coordinate with Sandag to determine, the next regionally significant priority for grade separations. But right now, the focus is on Palomar Street.
Do you know if Sandag has a focus on any of the grade separations? Is this on their radar?
Yes, so they actually have a program listed out with all of the grade separations that they would like to address regionally. Certainly Palomar is at the top of that right now. And then how it will get filtered for the remaining, I think it really depends on how we coordinate and discuss that going forward and
Okay.
what needs are.
And Palomar already has funding, right?
Yeah, so it's the closest to getting towards construction.
Mm-hmm.
All of the other projects, are very much in the preliminary stages, and so it needs to be re-looked at and determined as to which one would kind of come to the surface next.
Which is certainly very much needed in Palomar. As a lifelong resident of the South Bay, you just avoid that area at all costs because it's inundated with traffic. So not to take away from Chula Vista, kudos. I think it was Mary Salas who really pushed for that grade separation. Obviously, I'm here to represent District 8 in the city of San Diego, where many blue line stops lack grade separation. Obviously, having Palomar is very important, but it's one out of, I don't know off the top of my head how many stops there are in the blue line. I should know this, but obviously the lack of grade separation directly impacts the safety and quality of life for residents. It's not just about, well, the number one thing is to improve transit operations, but there's a matter of safety as well. Another big project that we continue having discussion and have made progress on is the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center. Sandag is currently going through a preliminary design, and I believe they're about to choose I think there was 4 designs that they had proposed, and they went out and took out to the community. So certainly that one is building traction, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we were able to take some of the, if my brain serves me, 6 years ago, we were able to take some of the funding that we received from the federal government for land that we were voluntold to sell, and that money was put into the preliminary design of the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center. So obviously enhancing this transit station is critical for improving accessibility and transit reliability in the busiest border crossing in the Western Hemisphere. This board probably doesn't hear me say this enough, but over 11,000 passengers hop on that trolley every single day, which is double what 12th and Imperial, which is the second most hopped on trolley station, I guess you could say. So certainly it's one of the most, it is the most important, I'll just say it is the most important transit stop, on top of the fact that 50% of people coming in from the border are gonna use MTS. I'm getting all my facts, huh? Are gonna use MTS transit, making my case here. So due to the importance of this project, I would like the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center project on the list of capital projects that staff will be seeking funding for. Obviously, District 8 communities rely heavily on transit, and MTS relies heavily on the Blue Line. So addressing these grade separations and reimagining the San Ysidro ITC will make a tremendous difference in the daily lives of many constituents. I will also point out that I think, regardless of what I personally feel about the president, I will say that during his last administration, he was, what is the word? He was very good with border infrastructure. I will say that. As a staffer, I remember asking GSA about a capital improvement project called the Otay Mesa Modernization, and staff told me, don't even think about it. It's not happening, never in your lifetime. And lo and behold, then President Trump in 2016 earmarks $120 million for the Otay Mesa modernization project, which happened, and Otay Mesa proper has been modernized, if you will. And during his last administration, I thought, well, there's a lot of focus on the border, and we were just ripe to get border infrastructure passed. And that was because of our ancestors, we weren't ready for any of that. And I want to make sure that we are ready. As I believe it was Mr. Peter Pizer said, the previous administration was not horrible with transportation, with the transportation needs of the nation. Obviously, we have a huge transportation need at the with the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center. So with that, I'm happy to make a motion to add the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center into the list of a staff's recommendation. And with that, that will be my motion for today.
Thank you very much, Director Moreno. We have a second from Director Bush, and we will go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Got it. Thank you. I'm trying to think about what I'm hearing from Mr. Pizer, and if he's able to get back on the line, that would be great. I'm hearing that the new administration may not be as electric friendly as the current administration. And I'm thinking about the conflict potentially then between federal grants for not just electric stuff, but that might open it up to other technologies such as hydrogen. And if so, how does that if that's true, do we need federal legislation assistance in order to comply with state requirements? Because we have state requirements to convert to electric buses, or not electric, clean air technology. Mm-hmm. And any new vehicles that we think. I'm trying to see if there's a conflict between state requirements and reduced federal funding, if that's going to occur, and if we need to have advocacy on that, number one. That doesn't need to be answered today, but you might consider that as something that is answered for the full board next week. My second question, which could be answered next week, is if there's reduced federal funding for electric things that often flows through the state, should we be paying more attention to what the federal government might be favoring more, such as hydrogen? Do we need to consider pivoting any of our current future plans to hydrogen because of the priority of federal funding? That could be answered next week as well. So,
no, I think we can answer those currently.
Okay.
Does Peter want to speak on that, or
certainly, I'm happy to. That's a great question. The federal program really doesn't differentiate in its funding between hydrogen and battery electric. They're both considered zero emission vehicles. And so the program that we are looking at, for example, to fund the SeaTac campus, does fund both hydrogen and battery electric. There's broad discretion that the administration has about what that split looks like, but there's no legislative preference for either one. We did see the Biden administration in this last round putting a little bit more emphasis on battery electric than on hydrogen, actually a significant greater emphasis. But hydrogen over the past year has emerged more and more as an option that transit agencies are looking at. So we don't really need federal legislation around that because there is no preference in the law. The issue really is going to be on the competitiveness of applications based on whatever signal the new administration sends when they put out a notice of funding opportunity for these discretionary grant programs. So we will see that signal probably in the spring when the next round of funding comes out. And they may signal an interest. I think they will signal less of an interest in electric vehicles broadly, both hydrogen and battery electric. But they also may express some preference in the use of their discretion for hydrogen or battery electric. So I think that's still an unknown here as we await the new administration.
Thank you. That will be important to watch because we have a lot of plans for electric overhead infrastructure that is grant dependent. And if that project became less desirable over the next 4 years, we'd have to pivot pretty quickly. So it's good that we are staying on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be watching that closely.
And I think we should also emphasize as well that we won't know if there's any kind of regionalization of the programs, meaning that certain regions become less competitive because of their political stance. We won't know that until the administration is already placed. So California has been successful in previous administrations to access the various programs in the Surface Transportation Act. But again, that's one of the unknowns.
All right, let's move to Director Elo Rivera.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you to our presenters, Julia, for your work. Peter, I want to thank you. I'm always impressed by the level of detail that you, the level of detail that you remain familiar with in terms of not just our legislative agenda, but kind of the project by project list. I know you have a portfolio that's much more expansive than just the city of, or the San Diego region. So thank you for paying attention to us the way that you do and lending your expertise to us. I have kind of a question about the actions that have been taken by federal administrations, and then might have a couple about how we look forward. Inflation Reduction Act funds that have not been spent down, I've gotten the impression that there's kind of a rush to get some of those out the door. I'm curious about what that means for MTS and to what extent in the next month or so there's going to be frantic activity to make sure that we get what we were hoping to get, or that the tap doesn't get turned off sooner than we need it to. Anyone who's able to answer that.
Yeah, I can jump in. Certainly, there's concerns for agencies that haven't obligated those funds. Those are definitely at risk. We have obligated all of our funds. So at this point, we do not see any risk of funds being taken away.
Yeah,
so
I mean more of things that we were looking at that seemed very promising as funds to pursue, and we are not sure that we will be able to pursue them because they've not been obligated out of the federal government yet.
Well,
Right.
We did resubmit CTAC
Right.
At the request of the administration.
Mhm.
That for our new bus division, it was highly ranked, but didn't get funding in the last cycle. And so they offered to us that we could resubmit it for leftover funding in that. And so do we have a timeline on when they expect to?
Those results, that's specifically for RAISE, that will come out mid-January. So before the new administration comes in, we should know. And then certainly all of the future programs, as Peter mentioned, we'll be keeping a close eye on, and we'll still be aggressive as we can. And we'll have to pivot, the best that we can to be competitive. But yes, that last one we resubmitted, we should know mid-January.
All right, thank you. That was the main question. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have a motion from Director Moreno, seconded by Director Bush, to forward a recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve the 2025 legislative program with the addition of advocating for funding for the San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please vote on the tablets. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 5 is information on project labor agreement monitoring. And we are going to turn to Samantha Leslie for this presentation. Please feel free to get set up and begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Leslie, and here I have Katie Rich from the Solus Group. Today's presentation is regarding project labor agreements. In 2021, the board directed staff through Board Policy 66 to negotiate a project labor agreement on its large construction projects. In December of 2023, the board approved the negotiated project labor agreement with the San Diego Building Trades Council. And in March, we got all the signatures on the PLA. And so today's meeting is to provide a report on how the PLA implementation program is going. We've had one completed project. It was a unique one. It was an emergency construction project, but we have a lot of future, some very large construction projects coming up in the next couple of years. And so Katie is, from the Solus Group, is MTS's consultant who monitors the compliance of the PLA, and she'll be providing a report on PLA background, what our PLA requires, how the one PLA construction project that was an emergency went, and some things to look forward to in the coming years. And with that, I'll transfer it over to Katie. Thank you.
Wonderful. Can you guys hear me okay? Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all. My name is Katie Rich with the Solus Group. I've done labor compliance for over 20 years, and I like to say the world of the 3 Ps, so public works, PLAs, and prevailing wage projects. I just wanted to kind of talk about your project labor agreement that we have in place and what we will be overseeing. So just really quick, what is a PLA? It's a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement with one or more labor organizations. It helps to establish the terms of the project. I'd like to say that it operates very much like a job site constitution. So it establishes work site conditions, project execution, and protocol to resolve labor disputes without resorting to strikes and lockouts. As a condition of this PLA, a contractor must sign the negotiated PLA with the relevant unions, which is something we work on educating them on. This was approved 12/14/2023. As Samantha mentioned, the fully signed PLA received on 3/21/2024. 12/14 was also when they authorized the execution of this negotiated PLA with the San Diego County Building and Construction Trades Council. So what does this agreement cover? It's going to cover all on-site preparation. So that's going to be construction, alteration, demo, install, improvement, landscaping, painting, or repair of building structures and other works. This also includes work that is done solely for the covered project in any kind of temporary yards, dedicated sites, and other areas provided that they are adjacent to the project, as well as any on-site or off-site batch plant that's constructed solely to supply materials. So pretty much any kind of site that's created for this project, that work will fall under the PLA. Oh, you're okay. Oh, thank you. So the furnishings of supplies, equipment, and materials which are stockpiled do not fall under this agreement, as well as items not covered on this agreement. It's going to be work of non-manual employees. So you have professionals, engineering, admin, supervisors, management employees, anyone that's doing security, safety, first aid, none of that falls under the PLA. I always like to note that if you have anybody coming on doing on-off haul or ready mix, which sometimes applies, that does fall under the agreement of the prevailing wage requirements. We do not have them attend any pre-job meetings, but we make sure to let the unions know that that will be happening. There is a 40% local hire goal of the total construction craft hours. A local resident is anywhere that lives in these MTS service area zip codes, and it can be a veteran that resides anywhere. I think 40% is a lofty goal, but I also think it's very doable, especially on the larger projects. So right now, what are the PLA cover projects? Projects that are implemented are new construction solicitations that are estimated to exceed 1 million. There are several that are not yet being implemented. New JOC master agreements for any JOC work order that is over 1 million. This to be solicited with PLA requirements, and this should happen around June of 2025. New solicitations for closed circuit television equipment install services when the individual work order involve furtherance of the construction project estimated again to exceed 1 million, to be solicited with PLA requirements around February 2026, and new master agreement solicitations for any architectural and engineering master agreements that involve individual task orders for geotechnical, surveying, or inspection services for the preparation of a construction project when that construction project is estimated to exceed 1 million This is to be solicited with PLA requirements around April 2026. So things are definitely adding on as the years go by. So what are the roles of MTS staff? They are here to help with these project construction solicitations. They're responsible for developing independent cost estimate scopes of work, posting this for solicitation. We want to try and increase the notice of their construction solicitations to ensure sufficient number of competitive bids, utilizing Planet bids, broadcasting notice of the bids, other local public agencies' Planet bids for registered firm lists, notices in newspapers, sending out email blasts, especially to DBE certified firms that perform that type of work, and also request they register on MTS's Planet bid site and review the solicitation. They can also reach out to the Solis group if you are having a hard time getting bids. We can work with the building trades to get any contractors that might be available and haven't heard about the project yet. So we definitely want to work hand in hand with MTS staff for these projects. We also want to make sure we're doing small business outreach. MTS also attends small business outreach events throughout the year to get the word out about these projects. We help with that as well. We want to make sure we're educating small contractors about these projects. A PLA can be intimidating, or they think it's going to create more work for them. So we want to make sure we're educating them as well. And then always use the good old web. MTS does have a dedicated web page with a copy of the PLA. We actually made a one-sheet cheat sheet of the facts for contractors. We also have one for MTS staff that they can utilize as well for any questions or concerns. And then they can always reach out to us directly. We're here to help for sure. So what are we here for? I always like to say that my role is to communicate, educate, and facilitate these projects. So communication is key with anything of this size, if it's a small or large project. Our first opportunity will be at a pre-bid meeting. That's where we can meet contractors interested, answer any questions or concerns, make sure they understand there is a PLA for these projects, but make sure they're comfortable and know that we're here to help them through the process. Our big part of communication as well as education is going to be at a pre-con meeting. This is our first opportunity to speak with the contractors that will be working on these projects post-award. We really want to make sure they understand not only the PLA requirements, but also the state prevailing wage requirements as well. Those do go hand in hand. Go over any of those forms they might have questions about. What do we do? Why are we doing this? Where does it go? Let them know we will be doing site interviews, whether it's in person or via mail, just to make sure they understand who we are, who they need to speak with if they have any questions or concerns. We're here to help. Pre-job meetings, that's a big part of a PLA. We're here to schedule and oversee these scope assignments to the local unions and make sure that these meetings run smoothly and efficiently, and make sure any questions or concerns have been answered, everything's in place, so when these contractors are ready to start work, they can go ahead and start that work. This is where we do the facilitating. During the life of these projects, we're constantly collecting, tracking, auditing all the information that we're coming in. So it's going to be all those certified payroll reports, all those forms that are required, how many local employees do we have on there, how are our stats looking. We want to make sure we're communicating to MTS. If we do have any issues or concerns, we're going to make sure the contractor knows this and issue them a document request to let you know these contractors are currently delinquent. We send out monthly reports for the previous month's work to the MTS PM so they can see where these projects are, as well as make sure they're a part of any emails or phone calls or meetings that we have, just to make sure if there are issues, everyone's on the same page and we can get things resolved smoothly. Another part of us working directly with the unions. We want to make sure they have what they need. We also want to make sure the contractors whose employees are with these unions are comfortable and feel that they're being taken care of and they have everything that they need. We're also here to mediate any disputes, handle any grievances. There is a process within the PLA where there are steps to be taken if there's a formal grievance. TSG does handle that. And then once things are closed out and compliance has been met, we want to make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's before we send out that final report to MTS. So I always like to talk about why it's important for project labor agreements. Community, I think, is really important because this gives local residents an opportunity for employment. This helps them see whatever's being created in their community, something they can be a part of. They can work where they live, and also the project that they are working on is right there. Union participation is huge on a PLA. This gives a great opportunity for us to get more local residents on these projects. They are a fantastic referral system. They are motivated to get their workers on these projects, and they're motivated to get local residents on these projects. So it really, really helps with that, as well as identifying any targeted workers. Veterans are a big one we want to get on these projects. Union work wonderfully with veteran different associations, so they're always great for that. Disadvantaged and small businesses, again, a PLA can be intimidating and not exciting for some small businesses. They're nervous. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable with it. The PLA has certain things in there specifically directed to DBE and small businesses that allows them to use their core workers a little bit differently versus a larger community or a larger contractor. So we want to make sure they can see that there is an advantage for them coming onto these projects. We want to make sure they're comfortable with it and that we want them on these projects. I also think too, it's nice because it limits projects disruption. So if somebody has a problem with something, there are steps that have to be taken formally before they can just walk off. Nobody can just say, I'm done doing this, forget it. They'll come to us, we'll get it resolved and do it throughout the PLA. So it's nice, it's documented. Everybody's involved and has a specific role of what they need to do. So disruptions for sure make a big difference when it does not happen. So as mentioned, we have had one project so far that fell under the PLA. This was procured as an emergency contract due to the safety issues at both the grade crossing and the bridge. The prime contractor was DRS Contracting. They had 3 contractors on: Cat Tracking, Laser West Engineering, and Connor Concrete Cutting. Cat Tracking is a certified DBE, so they were able to use the exception of their 3 core workers. This was a quick project. So between May and June was when they were getting organized. There actually was only 3 or 4 days of work. So that made it a little bit difficult to hit those local hire goals with only 3 days of work. It definitely had a quick turnaround. This was our first project that was implemented under the PLA. I will say that we learned some things from this. It was a little bit difficult to get the forms submitted in a timely manner. We made multiple requests for it. The contractor very much leaned on the fact that it was emergency work, but we had the conversation of, we've had this pre-job, you've agreed to these things. We are currently working with them in the union. There were some fines that the contractor does have to pay off willingly, and they certainly acknowledged it. I think the lesson learned was there needs to be an emphasis that when a PLA project is coming up, that you let us know immediately so we can start to get things in place. There is a 30-day requirement for core employees. We need to have a form filled out showing us what employees are going to be on these projects. We have to have it 30 days in advance of these projects. I think it's really important to make sure that even if it is emergency work, that does not mean that the PLA requirements are exempt. A lot of times a contractor with 3 or 4 days of work think these PLA steps are going to get in the way and they don't want to deal with it. Not the case. It can be a very smooth process. We just want to make sure everybody understands you have agreed to this. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to make sure that they understand that. So it's just more of, again, communication with staff with MTS, and then us making sure we have everything that we need as well. Luckily, I'm really good at asking questions, so that's not usually a problem. So you can kind of see the stats that we were working with. There were a total of 1,095.36 total hours. 55 of those hours were only from local workers. Again, this was due to the fact that it was a 3 or 4 day of projects. The contractor didn't do the best job, but we at least did get 55 hours. There were 2 local workers that were identified out of 37. So not terrible, but we can definitely do better moving forward. And there were no veterans on this project, which we always like to check. So further PLA projects coming up. Construction contract executed. There is a change to this. The Iris Rapid Route happened prior, and I believe was the last skilled and trained project, so that does not fall under this PLA project list. American Plaza Pedestrian, active procurement, Imperial Avenue maintenance, Orange Line improvement. Both of those are larger projects, so I see that 40% goal being hit much easier than a smaller 1, 2, or 3 million project. Many more contractors, lots more hours. Future construction contracts, there's a South Bay maintenance facility, traction power, SBMF building demo, and then a downtown parallel feeders project. So lots of things coming up, lots of potential. We're excited to get some local workers on these projects and to get things going. I know the building trade is very excited about MTS PLA, so another thing to look forward to for sure. So what future efforts are we going to make sure we're hitting these goals? Mandatory pre-job conferences, that is nothing a contractor can talk their way out of. Everyone must be there. If we have to have multiple meetings, we will have multiple meetings. We follow those guidelines very seriously. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Every single scope of work has been claimed and assignments have been accepted by the unions and as well as the contractors. We want to make sure they understand the hiring goals and how we can help them reach them. Targeted contacts with contractors to discuss upcoming work as well as compliance status. This is again going to go hand in hand with outreach, talking to contractors on existing projects and working with the union and building trades as well. We want to make sure we are verifying any local hiring effort made. So all those forms that we're requesting, that's going to have the information to show us local hire information. We're going to be here recording workers that are interviewed, hired. We're tracking those hours. We want to make sure we're getting as much information as possible. And if we see that we're not hitting those goals, talk to the unions and the building trades to figure out how we can get more local residents on these projects. We want to make sure contractors have resources. So helmets to hard hats, pre-apprenticeship programs. There's lots of them in San Diego. There's lots of motivation. People want to work on these projects. So we want to make sure they have the information of where to find these workers. And then just to do continued outreach. So that's monitoring upcoming candidate referrals. It's working with those pre-apprenticeship programs. It's talking to other contacts that we might have. And again, working with the unions and the building trades directly. Amazing resources. Everybody has the same goal. We want local workers and veterans on these projects for sure. That being said, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Questions or concerns?
Thank you very much for the update. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, we'll open committee member discussion on this informational item, and we're going to begin with Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of good information in here, and I want to preface my statements by just saying, I know we're only evaluating one project, right?
Of course.
And you indicated that was an emergency project. Was the 30-day requirement, was it applied to an emergency project? I think you talked about 30 days prior having, going through compliance. Was it applied to an emergency project?
So it's applied to every single PLA project. There's a 30-day requirement for a specific form that's going to show what is considered a core employee. And that's somebody that's been on this company or subcontractor's payroll for X amount of days before they're considered a core employee. So in this case, yes, that was a requirement. Did the contractor follow it? Unfortunately, no. And that's actually part of what they're paying penalties for right now, is because they didn't follow that 30-day and have the correct amount of core employees on the project. Moving forward, yes, that's for every single project. We have a new project coming up. They're already giving me their 30 days now, so I have their core form. So in the next month when they start, we have everything in place for them. It is an interesting thing to have it be in advance, but there's also a benefit to it, so we can see who's going to be on these projects. The union has an idea of who's going to be on these projects, and the contractor can say, okay, we have 20 people that are considered core employees, or 30 people, but we have 10 of them that are local. Maybe they only have one, and that gives them time to get more local residents on these projects.
Okay, I'm just asking because I think with emergency projects, there has to be additional complications, right? So that's something that I want to continue to monitor. The only other thing is just, I don't like the local percentage at all. Like, I just don't like it. If it's $500,000, if it's $30 million, I think for me, the purpose of a project labor agreement is to continue to recycle dollars in our own region. And if we are doing this and that is not occurring, and I'm not blaming you at all. I think this is something that we have to work with our partners on that have advocated for project labor agreements, right? Because I'm not in the business of, money going out of the region. I think it's very beneficial to have money stay in the region, right? And so, for our local economy. So I will continue to watch that. If there's anything else I think that we can do as a board to assist, let us know. This is very important. Project labor agreements are good for the reasons that you stated in this very presentation. But if those benefits are not going to people that are working in our communities, then there's a really big problem. So I'm glad that you're here to just tell us how it went for this one project. I know it's only one. But I still think there's a great opportunity, and I don't want to let it go by or slip because it was just one project that we're looking at right now. So thank you very much for the work, and I'm glad that you'll be stepping in a little earlier. And I think for me, I'm committed to continue to have conversations with the building trade so that we can make sure that, we're doing everything that we can to get folks to funnel people into our apprenticeship programs that are coming from our pre-apprenticeship program, there's just been a lot of work on the ground that we've been doing in San Diego. So we should never see numbers like that. So anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. I know it's informational, and I'll stop talking. Thank you.
And Chair, I just wanted to follow up on that. You know, obviously, we would have much preferred to bring you a presentation that had a lot more projects and a lot better, you know, rules. It was the one project we did was an emergency, you know, when we were talking about it internally, it certainly a lot of growing pains, you know, of where and how. And I think the experience from that will allow us to focus more on like, where's the extra needed education and follow up on future projects. I do think with emergency projects, kind of one of our things to monitor, and we hope we don't have a bunch of emergency projects, but 2024 has been the year of emergency projects, both from the flood and some other things that are going on. That 30 days, I think that, you know, that's just one of the things that's on my list to monitor of like, we want to, I think we have a really good relationship with the building trades and that they will work with us because there are some emergency projects where you do have the 30-day time frame, because even though you need to get started right away, you've got to order materials. There's things that have to be in place before you can actually start the work. There are other ones where they can get out within 3 days. And I think nobody wants us to not be able to repair a public safety hazard, which is what emergency procurements are, is allow us to maintain public safety and continue operations. And we don't want that to be delayed arbitrarily by a 30-day requirement in the PLA. So that's certainly on our radar to track, to work with the building trades so that if we don't have a 30 days, they're satisfied about why we don't and the efforts we've made to comply with the PLA around that, you know? And so, and hopefully we'll have these good relationships with prior PLA experience with some of these contractors. So we'll have some of the information already kind of available and it'll be more dialed in. But that is an area of, I think we'll monitor it this year. Hopefully we can just work out a practice that works for everyone, but it could be something where we try to seek negotiating a modification that, you know, based on experience, what are the timing rules for emergency projects? Because that's just a balance that we need to do. But we're obviously hopeful that the next projects will have a lot more local hire. We won't have these issues. You know, we did look at what the zip codes were for the non-local hires, because I at first was wondering, well, are they potentially still within San Diego County, but they're just not within MTS's jurisdiction? That's not the case. I was wondering, are they maybe just up in Temecula, you know, or even Mexico, because we have a lot of people that work in San Diego County that live in Riverside County or live south of the border in Tijuana. That wasn't the case. It was a contractor that I think is based in LA. They're a union contractor, but the union that they're associated with is in LA, you know, so that most of the residents were LA County residents. So interesting, you know, some of my conceptions of what I thought the data would show us was not. And so it's just, and in that project, it was 3 to 4 days of work. So it's maybe not a big deal to have a worker drive down from LA for those 3 to 4 days of work as opposed to a longer term project. But, you know, we'll hopefully when we come back, are we reporting these every 6 months or every year?
Every year, per board policy 66 will come to the board with an update.
Okay. So hopefully next year we'll have a lot more data, a lot more bigger projects that can really see what's working, what's not.
Yeah, and the good thing is we can monitor it under the structure of a PLA, right? So that's a good thing that we can keep, because we don't know, I really don't know how much money, you know, has gone outside of the region with the projects that we have done, right, without the PLA. So that's a good thing, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but I'm always going to be loud about local numbers. So thank you.
For sure, too. And a note on the 30 days, that's just for one specific form. That's not going to delay people getting on the project and starting work for sure. And I've talked to the building trades, and yes, they're in agreement. These things come up, so I think that would make a huge difference for sure.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. Thank you. Hit all of the key points. One thing I didn't hear is your work required for sign off in order for a contractor to get paid?
Ideally, yes. So I tell MTS staff to certainly check with us, especially since near the end of a project. That month report that we send out is going to show them any contractor that is current and or delinquent. It also tracks the local hires for every month. So it's kind of a ever-changing report that's living and breathing. Ideally, yes, they do reach out to us first. If there's an issue that's happening, they would know before payment would be released. They're going to be a part of our conversation. So this isn't something that would come up. They could send an email just saying, hey, these 4 contractors submitted pay apps. Are they good to go? And it would take 5 minutes for us to say yes or no. So especially on a short, quick project, yes.
And if a contractor would have a difference of opinion on your interpretation of the compliance, how would that difference be settled?
Well, it's lovely because there are specific requirements on these projects, whether it be certified payroll reports, forms that are within the PLA or prevailing wage packet that we send out. We communicate to them every single month, sometimes multiple times a month if they're not compliant, of what we're missing from them. So usually to get it resolved, it's something as simple as maybe we just need to show proof of fringes paid to the union. So they'll never be in the dark with it. They can argue it, but until we physically have those items and we can check them off, you know, they're not going to be in compliance.
So it would be fair to say that things that you're seeking compliance for are very objective and measurable and less subjective. Is that true?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Sounds like a great compliance check. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Bush.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry, it's Samantha or Katie?
Samantha, Katie.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yes and yes.
Yeah, yes, okay. So thank you both for the work. I mean, this is really thorough analysis, and we just in the city of National City approved PLAs for our projects, and I haven't seen this type of analysis. So I'm interested in having further conversations on this breakdown. So really appreciate the thoroughness and the work and the conversation. And just real quick, want to second everything that Member Montgomery Stepp said about the local hire. If, you know, this emergency project is the first one, so understanding that, but moving forward, yeah, I think really, I really also want to see more of the focus on local hire and whatever we can do to help the building trades, to help really the contractors, right? To facilitate that. I'm definitely open to hearing that, but definitely want to make sure that we're proactive in having the local hire. That's a really important piece.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Director Bush. Seeing no further comments on this informational item, let's move ahead in the agenda. Item 7 is the review of the draft agenda for next week's board meeting. With item number 4 today, we forwarded a recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve the 2025 state and federal legislative program. I would like to therefore go ahead and add that to next week's board agenda. With the addition of the points that Directors Moreno and Bush made, with the addition of advocating for funding for San Ysidro International Intermodal Transit Center. That was non-controversial, so we'll put it on consent. Any other changes or requests for next week's board meeting? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to any staff communications or committee member communications.
If I could, I just want to remind you that we're doing a rider appreciation event Saturday. It's the Holly Jolly Trolley. We started that last year, and it's a great event. So hopefully, I know that some board members did sign up to attend, so I'll try to see you there if possible. I love the sweater that Vice Chair Goebel is wearing. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, if any of you are driving down I-5, you will note that there's a beautiful new artwork next to the E Street trolley station. And that was something that MTS procured and finalized. So kudos to our procurement department for getting that done and for everybody who was involved in getting grant funding for it and working with the community. It's a beautiful addition to that very large wall next to our station.
Very good. With that, the Executive Committee's next meeting date will be January 9th, 2025 at 9 o'clock in the morning. This meeting is adjourned.